So yeah, my name's Jim. I'm Senior Analyst at eConsultancy, so it's great to be out here today. I talk about email a lot. I particularly enjoy talking about email. I think it's really innovative, and hopefully you can see a lot of that in the examples and the research that I'll be showing you today. Let's just wind back a few years. Let's go back to 1978, to the first ever commercial email that was sent by a man named Gary Thurk, also known as the godfather of spam. Now, Gary was distinguished himself by sending out 400 emails to the members of the ARPANET, advertising DEC machines. And from that original 400 emails, he made $13 million worth of sales. So that's pretty significant, isn't it? You know, we'd love to make that sort of ROI today, but some of the challenges that we face as marketers are, by the time you've read this, 20 million emails will have been sent. But also we're working across a number of challenges. Henry mentioned those in the initial introduction. You know, the number of messages that consumers are seeing is multiplying in an exponential rate. But also the number of touch points that consumers face on the customer journey, the path to purchase, is increasing. Recent research from McKinsey put that at 20% year on year. Now, this is challenging in one respect, in the sense that it's greater potential for customers to object to something along the way and drop out, but it also gives some significant opportunities to deliver great customer experience and build loyalty. As part of that, email fits very well. So, in my presentation today, I'm going to be explaining how email really, in terms of it as a channel, really is ahead, leaps and bounds, ahead of other channels, and really allows us to keep up with today's modern consumer, who is more often than not jumping between channels, brands, and devices at an ever-increasing rate. And as part of that, I'm going to be talking to you about personalisation, bringing you some fascinating, I hope, case studies that explore how consumers are being connected and engaged to by marketers. At the same time, I'm going to be talking about how marketers are making better use of data to affect better customer journeys, in particular taking into account real-time information, up-to-the-minute preferences of consumers. And finally, I'm going to be talking to you about possibly quite a fascinating area, the future of email. Where will it be in 5 years, but also where will it be in maybe 25, 30 years' time? So let me just sort of kick off and sort of give a bit of background to just email in general. You know, a couple of years ago, we were all quite worried about the fact that with the rise in instant messenger and social networks, that we'd be spending less time with email. But that's certainly not the case. Recent DMA research found the actual time spent on email at home is growing. In 2014, the average time per day was 2.015 hours. Very specific number, I admit. And this has gone up from 1.74 in 2010. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. It's partly due to the fact that we are now more connected. The IAB estimates that we have, on average, 7 internet-enabled devices in every UK household. So what's the first thing that you load up onto one of these devices? Yeah, of course, it's an email app. So email, in general, is much more sort of omnipresent in our lives, which is definitely explaining the sort of increased time. And it's certainly offsetting the time we spend on the likes of instant messenger and also social networks. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly then, marketers are saying they get good to excellent ROI from email. This is taken from a report that eConsultancy produced in association with Adestra, and we looked at marketers. This includes agencies and companies. Now, I think that this is also backed up with further DMA data. In terms of ROI, the DMA estimated that every £1 spent on email in 2014 nets an ROI of around £24.93, and this is up from £21.40 in 2010, so we're seeing it grow year on year. Now, this data, this is the previous data put against other channels. As you can see here, hopefully you don't want to get in front of the screen, that email is very much level pegging with SEO. Now, this is quite significant here, and I think there's a number of reasons for this. I think the innovative technology has made it easier than ever to implement really great email campaigns. At the same time, this technology is allowing us to personalize and segment our audience more effectively than ever before. One of the things I wanted to point out here too was interested to see that the lower score attributed to social media, it's in the 30% range, if you combine the 28 with the 7. Now I think that this is partly down to the move by the likes of Facebook to implement pay-for-play algorithms and limiting organic reach. So if you contrast that with email marketing, email is a channel that gives you a direct connection to the customer. It's a channel that you own, and you can build up a long-term relationship that goes way beyond the sale. Now, of course, personalization is more important than ever. It's a hygiene factor for many consumers. I think that it's certainly an expectation that we have as we move between devices, and it's challenging for marketers. They've got more channels that they need to master and take control of. At the same time, when it comes to the way consumers feel about their interactions with brands, they expect to be remembered and also treated like individuals, which can be a significant challenge. But, you know, it is changing. Traditionally, when it came to, say, a relationship building exercise, you might have somebody sign up for a newsletter. You get their name and you get their email address, of course. You contact them with a welcome email, collect a bit more information, and over time invite them to participate in quizzes or contribute certain bits of data so you can build up a complete picture, so you can then build that relationship. Now, increasingly, brands are using innovative technology to make much better use of data, joining the dots between departments and systems to ensure that they can jumpstart that relationship much quicker. Now, of course, it's marketers really interested in personalization. You know, it's something that they want to do better at. 64% of marketers in our research with Adestra agreed that that was something that they'd like to do better, and it's a challenge. Now, this is a good case study based on better use of data that I mentioned before. Now, I don't know about you, but often when I'm getting emails from favorite e-commerce sites, I'm signed up for a few, I like a bargain. I often get emails which indicate this is the most best-selling item on the site this day, according to all our users. Now, this is okay, it's not always relevant. Now, this particular case study was for Littlewoods and Shop Direct. Now, what these brands were doing was identifying people that were browsing particular items on their site and then following up with them later on with the particular items if they hadn't bought them. So in the case of Valerie, you might not be able to see the email from back there, but Valerie was contacted by Littlewoods because she had been browsing the Dynamics BE 1700 elliptical cross trainer 3 or 4 times over the previous month. So as a result, based on that information from the web analytics, they tied that to the email analytics. So that Valerie got an email with 10% off your next order. Why don't you check this out? And here's an incentive for you to actually finally put it into your basket and buy it. And it's very much of a similar principle with the Shop Direct example you can see here. And the results for that were way above industry averages. Now, I quite like this example as well, because as you imagine, I work at e-consultancy. I'm a bit of a gadget geek. I love my technology. And I have a British Gas smart meter at home. Partly also the Scottish in me as well. I like to exactly know how much I'm spending on my energy. Now, surprisingly, some people aren't as engaged as me. And this is what British Gas was trying to do, to encourage people to think about the technology they have in their understairs cupboard. Now, what British Gas did was they created an email campaign that included dynamic data from their smart meter, so people could see it without having to log in. So instantly, it was right in front of them and encouraging them to basically sample the data and click in to learn a bit more how they can engage with their smart meter. Now, the results for this were very positive. As you can see, open rates saw an uplift of well over 50%, and unsubscribe rates were reduced by a significant 60%. Now, of course, marketers are doing very clever things around automation, and I believe there is a base camp later that is going to be covering this in more depth. This one I particularly like. It's an Adestra case study for Harrod Horticulture. Now, Harrod Horticulture, it's a bit of a tongue twister if I say that too quickly, so I'll try and keep it slow, felt they were missing out on the potential revenue they could get from email. and essentially also building up a relationship with customers. So they brought in Adestra to help them with that particular case, and they developed a 3-stage welcome program with their campaign. So if somebody signed up, the first stage, if they bought something or signed up to the site, they were given that welcome to Harrod Horticulture email, establishing a bit about them to give them a bit more information. The second stage, as you can see on the right, was essentially to build up the credibility of Harrod, to encourage people to perhaps check out a few more items. So this would include a link to some of the special offers that were available on the site, or some of the top reviews that customers have placed with the business, because it's a very reliable one. At the same time, experiment with some of the top demanded products that are on the site at that particular time. Now, the third stage was slightly more complex or slightly more advanced. Now, what Harrod did was they fed their transactional data into message focus. So as a result, they were able to base future recommendations on previous transactions to make it more relevant. At the same time, what they set up was some automated campaigns based on the seasonal changes. So, these are essential summer items that you need to stock up and replenish based on previous things that you've bought. Now, this was overwhelmingly a big success for Harrod, and that's why I'm obviously talking to you about it today. Out of their total revenue attributed to email, this automated campaign generates over 25% of that figure. I run a lot of, as I said, a lot of workshops and webinars and presentations on email, and it was interesting to me that the last one I did, I got some feedback from some clients and said, Jim, I really like email. I think it's really powerful. It does great ROI. But it's a bit flat to me. It's a bit two-dimensional. I think that obviously, hopefully some of the examples I've given to you so far certainly don't portray that view, but I think that obviously progressive marketers are using email in much more innovative ways, and certainly making it more interactive. And I think this really plays very well to the audiences, because internet users expect to interact with what they see online. So this is an example from Yahoo Travel. Now, Yahoo Travel were looking to engage their audience, the newsletter to the travel newsletter. They were getting better understanding of their customers. So they introduced a series of campaigns to get an understanding of their behaviours around holiday making. So this particular one asked them whether they would be interested in travelling to Tahiti or Hawaii, a choice of 2 Polynesian paradises. Now, what you can't see here was the fact that this was an animated GIF. So that's one thing. But also it encouraged people to vote because it was dynamic. You could see your live voting actually within the email. You weren't taken to a separate subpage. The advantage of this as well was because there wasn't a separate website needed to be developed to support this campaign, it was handled entirely within the email. It meant that the team could be quite dynamic with that and get that out much quickly without the budget constraints that often can be in place for the bigger campaigns. Now, this is for Bonobos. I don't know if any of you have heard of Bonobos before. It's a retailer of menswear. Now, this was campaign acknowledged the fact that sometimes when you do get an email, you are at work more often than not. So it gave you the option, if you are at work and your boss is watching, to click on a spreadsheet, or if not, you can click on the standard website. But if you clicked on get the spreadsheet, you were given a spreadsheet. But actually, it's not a normal spreadsheet. It's actually a web page. It's an interactive web page. So what you could do with this particular Excel spreadsheet is you could sort of put your sort of requirements in, what sort of colors you like. You could put additional questions. Do you take risks with dress clothes? And also the question is, if you put certain cuff sizes on, it gave you an indication of the type of animal you were. So it's quite humorous as well. But even better, it encouraged you to interact with the Excel spreadsheet because it had hidden codes in the comments section. Now, I think this is kind of interesting, but actually what this does is it ties it back to the site, because actually this page is very much calculating your style, so it can recommend products for when you are away from the eye shot of your boss. But even better, what this contributes to is it's a great collection device. It collects information about you that can be used for future relevant campaigns going forward. Here's another example. Here's a similar case. Now, I log into sales sites every now and again. It's quite frustrating to click through and find that what you want isn't necessarily there. You've wasted a bit of time. We're all very busy these days. This email is part of a much longer email. Couldn't fit it onto the presentation today, but it gives dynamic buttons within the email to indicate everything from footwear size to styles. So you click on either one of the buttons and you get straight through to that sales site. So I think this is great because it saves time. You go through to the relevant products. But I think this also encourages consumers to interact and share data because there's a clear benefit to them that would possibly work better had you simply asked them outright, what's your shoe size? What sort of footwear style do you like? So that worked very well for size. Now imagine thinking now about the customer journey. Henry was referenced something that early on in the introduction. Now imagine that your customer, you're a credit card provider, and your customer applies for a credit card. And they're placed into a customer journey for regular credit card users. But what if they become inactive? Then that customer journey is no longer relevant. Now, marketers are thinking much more about the data sets they have on customers, making better use of that, installing DMPs. And our research shows a third of marketers are planning to install DMPs in their organization this year. And get a better understanding so they can assign the relevant customer journeys. Now, marketers are also thinking much more along the lines of real-time information about up-to-the-minute preferences of consumers, so they can contact consumers in the context of how they want to be spoken to and when. And we've talked a lot about one-to-one marketing for a number of years, but I think that when it comes to email, that particular idea is now a reality. Now, this is a good case study from Nectar, which is the award scheme. This campaign was encouraging people to spend the points. Often, I know from my personal experience, we build up a big bank of them because they're not always sort of in plain sight and not sure where to exactly spend them. It's a bit of an afterthought sometimes. Now, this campaign attempted to get us to think a bit more about where we could potentially use those points. This email was dynamically updated depending on location. So as you can see here, hopefully you can see right at the back there with the magnifying glass, this area down at the bottom would update depending on where you were. So if you're near Homebase or an Argos, which are all participants to the Nectar reward scheme, that would pop up. At the same time, in addition to being influenced by the weather, this would also be influenced by location. This would also be influenced by the weather. So if it was rainy, you would be suggested locations or things that you could do that were under the comfort of protection. And also vice versa if it was sunny. And as a result, this was highly above average with average unique click-through rates of 66.7%. We ran some research earlier this year, separate to the email marketing industry census, and we found that when it comes to personalization, marketers, as well as thinking about individual silos, of which email comes out top, they're also thinking about personalizing the entire omni-channel customer experience. And we often talk about John Lewis being held up as a sort of leader in this field of investing very much into omni-channel. But email here can play a valuable part in joining up offline and online. And this case study from Monsoon Accessories is a good case study in that. Now, Monsoon took the view that consumers are most likely to engage with email if it relates to something that they've recently purchased. I certainly am. So they incorporated a strategy which was an e-receipt campaign, which would also include cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So what they did was they took into account that previous purchase history online and also in store to recommend particular items. You can't see that possibly at the back, it's quite small. Particular items that might complete the look or would relate to their individual preferences. Now, this e-receipt strategy is certainly also being adopted by Argos later on this year. And as a result of the particular campaign, they increased open rates from 19% to 65%, and also click-through rates trebled to 8%. So very successful for Monsoon off the back of that particular campaign. I bet you're wondering when I was going to get to mobile, because mobile is crucial, and we also have, obviously, a big announcement coming up later on I've got to allude to. I can't go into more in detail, but I'm sure Lisa's going to give a bit more information then. It's very exciting. But mobile is more important than ever. As I mentioned before, we've got more devices in our homes. We're constantly connected, continuously connected at that. When it comes to the amount of time we're spending on mobile, that actually exceeded desktop this year. So for many consumers, mobile is the gateway to the internet and the sum total of their experiences with brands online. And this is reflected in the data you can see here. If you look at the UK, 62% of email opens are happening on a mobile. And this is far ahead of Australia and America. And this relates to the fact that obviously the UK is very sophisticated when it comes to mobile ownership and adoption. And this is also reflected in Adestra data as well. This looks at sort of worldwide rather than specific to individual countries. But we saw that just under half of email opens are on a mobile device. So perhaps unsurprisingly, when it comes to email marketing practices, going back to the Adestra email marketing industry census, one of the most important areas of focus for marketers right now is optimizing email for mobile devices. And in fact, since we introduced this question 3 years ago, this actual response has gone up by 144%. So what does this mean? This means basically designing responsive templates, designing adaptive landing pages, and thinking about the mobile path to purchase. Now, here's a great case study in point for bags, etc. Now, when it came to mobile bags, etc., we're playing a bit of a catch-up game. They found that when they analysed their usage online, they found that a lot of their customers were actually coming to them from a mobile device, which was a bit of a challenge because they didn't have a mobile optimized template. In fact, a lot of retailers don't. So what Bags Etc. did in partnership with Adestra, they moved from what you can see here is quite a complicated layout, quite busy, you might admit, to something a lot more simple. Here you can see the bag is the hero, the product is the hero. A lot of extraneous detail was removed, so you can focus on that, and a clear call to action. At the same time, there was subject line testing as well to make sure it was relevant. As a result of this change, quite a significant change to that mobile template, overall mobile transactions went up by 1,500%, and also mobile revenues increased by 850%. So it was a clear win for Bags, etc. Now, we're going to be having a base camp later on cutting-edge email design, so I think this plays very well into that. When you think about the way you interact with email on your mobile device, it's very different from, say, the way you might interact with it, say, on your laptop at home. I certainly, when I'm looking at email on my laptop, I'm snacking, I'm relaxing. But compared to that, say I'm on my mobile device on the way to work, I'm maybe filling in dead time, I'm essentially scrolling. So I think the progressive marketers are thinking much more about the sort of behaviours of the way in which we interact with email in this way. So we've seen a greater use of white spacing and length. So this email, obviously, if you join it all together, is quite long. It's also quite simplistic, and if you click through on the particular items for the warm weather wish list, you go straight through to the website and you can check out in 2 clicks to buy. Now, I think that what this also does is align very closely with the particular brand as well, because the design of the email actually reminds me very much of a sort of upmarket clothing retailer's catalogue, for example, so it fits very well with the overall branding. It's sort of like a fashion magazine, almost. Now, given the importance of mobile to our sort of overall strategy, it's so integral to everything we do, we thought in the email marketing industry census, we'd ask marketers how advanced their strategies were when it came to mobile. And what perhaps surprised me was that only 5% said it's very advanced, which is kind of a shock, with just over half saying it's non-existent. What's going on here? Well, we dug in a bit more detail into the verbatims in the responses. A lot of this comes down to effectively time and resource. One poor chap that commented that he is one person for a very large retailer looking after the worldwide email campaign strategy. So of course that doesn't leave him with much time to actually think about all these innovative technologies and designs that I've just been talking about. But I think this also comes down to budgetary constraints as well. According to the report, that we found that the overall budget attributed, the overall marketing budget attributed to email has actually gone down from 19% last year to 13% this year. And I think this is partly because I think email just gets such great ROI, it's become part of the furniture. But what we need to do is think about all these exciting new innovative technologies that can really push the boundaries and I think keep up with today's consumers who are on the move, changing brands, devices very quickly. So, you know, we've talked about where we've been, where we're coming from. Let's talk about the future. Where's it all going to go? Now, according to a recent Adestra report, things are looking pretty good for email going forward in 5 years' time. Adestra asked a range of respondents in different sectors. This looks particularly at retailers, but there were very consistent results across the sectors. Only 6% of retailers actually admitted that email would become redundant, which is great news. At the same time, 3/4 of retailers said email will still be high for ROI. And I think this reflects the fact that email has been developing and progressing and innovating so much over the last couple of years, and it will continue to innovate and really make a big difference to marketers' bottom lines. In terms of recent innovations, there were some certain murmurings in the email community about a certain B&Q email that went out last year. I don't know if any of you are aware of this particular one. No? Yeah? Okay. Preaching to the converted there. So this one is actually an email, but it's got the sort of inklings of a mini microsite. So the rotating carousel. And you can also do much more in this particular email. You don't necessarily have to go straight to the B&Q site. Now, at the same time, what we're also seeing is the potential for making email the first and last click. So Gmail is a very solid player in the email community. Google is experimenting with something called Pony Express, which enable you to buy products within one click with an email. I think that this is certainly is a powerful case for email going forwards as a sort of e-commerce platform. But I think at the same time, you know, I've spoken to experts in this field when it comes to email design. I think this is quite good. It takes a lot of investment. I think you've got to let the conversion happen where it's going to happen. If it obviously works in that, definitely go for it. It works really well. But also, what about sort of 20 years' time? You know, we published a report on virtual reality recently. By 2020, virtual reality will be a $30 billion industry. Oculus Rift is a well-known brand, but also HTC, Samsung are getting into the space. And we're going to move from these sort of big hulking great units with big wires attached to them and big batteries to something that's a little bit more straightforward that people can use at home. So we're going to increasingly move away from that sort of screen that you can see there to something that's much more three-dimensional. And as you can see, I think email is going to play a big part in that. Obviously, you can see the Gmail and much more interactive scrolling. So I think even as we move into virtual worlds, email is going to have a big place in our lives. Now, I think a presentation wouldn't be complete if I didn't mention wearable technology, particularly Apple Watches. We get asked this all the time at eConsultancy. What does this mean for this? What does this mean for that? Now, Apple Watches have been much debated. I think that when it comes to the potential to engage through watches, you've got a very small screen real estate. That's the main barrier there, and I think they're just working that out. Marketers have a lot of cues already about customers. They can use location on mobile devices to, say, serve relevant advertising if they're within a particular area in the shopping aisle. I think what the smartwatches do, the Apple Watch in particular, is it gives marketers more cues. I think going forward, as the Apple Watch progresses and develops more sensors, I think this will only make the Apple Watch more valuable. So I can imagine a scenario of a future Apple Watch having a sensor to work out whether you're hot or cold. So if you're feeling particularly hot, you could maybe get an email from Coke with a voucher to claim it in store to cool you down. I think it's worked very well as a coupon-based system actually in retail as well with smartwatch email technology. I think also when it comes to potential for hotels, another example, we've seen Starwood guest resorts start to use Apple Watches to open doors. Imagine if you tied it in with an email campaign. You get an email as you go straight through with an email from the restaurant saying, hey, welcome to your room. Here's a voucher to claim downstairs in the restaurant with a discount. There are lots of opportunities. I think we're still working those out. But anyway, this is enough from me. Thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been great to talk to you. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask me in the networking session. Thank you very much.